Greetings, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the 45th Annual AAAS Forum on Science and Technology Policy. I'm Claire Fraser, the president of AAAS and director of the Institute for Genome Sciences at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. It is my great pleasure to be introducing our keynote speaker to kick off today's program, Dr. Sudip Parikh. As you all know by now, Sudip began his tenure as the 19th CEO of AAAS on January 6th of this year. I don't think he took this job expecting that just over 2 months in, he would move from his office on the 12th floor of the AAAS building in downtown Washington, where we would normally gather for this event, into his basement or his kids' playroom. I'm told that sometime in June, it became official that he has spent more time running AAAS from his basement than from his office. Sudip is a biochemist by training, having received his PhD in macromolecular structure and chemistry from the Scripps Research Institute. After graduate school, he began a career that for more than 2 decades has placed him at the nexus of science, policy, and society. After serving as a presidential management fellow at the NIH, Sudip joined the staff of the Senate Appropriations Committee, where he served for a decade as science advisor and professional staff. After leaving Capitol Hill, Sudip joined Battelle, where he ran the Agri-Food and Health and Consumer Solutions units. After Battelle, Sudip was Senior Vice President and Managing Director at DIA Global, a multidisciplinary organization that brought multiple stakeholders together to advance healthcare product development. Since joining AAAS just 10 months ago, Sudip's leadership has had a tremendous positive impact on this organization in so many ways. He has positioned AAAS to be a powerful voice for science during a time when we are surrounded by what seems like so much noise. He's undertaken the first full-scale review of our governance structure in 7 decades. I have the pleasure of working closely with him on this project, and I am confident that AAAS will come out of this process stronger, more nimble, and more representative of the society it seeks to serve. Today, though, as Sudip speaks to us about the intersection of COVID-19 and racial injustice, I just want to say how powerful his statements and actions on this critically important issue have been. If you haven't seen some of his recent writings, I encourage you to find them and read them. He has been truly fearless in positioning AAAS at the forefront of combating systemic racism in the scientific enterprise. He clearly recognizes that in order to realize its full potential and truly serve all of society, science must increase the participation and advancement of underrepresented groups in its ranks. I'm eager for you to hear what Sudip is doing to achieve this goal starting here at home. And I am confident that in doing so, other organizations will follow suit. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of AAAS, Dr. Sudip Parikh.
Claire, thank you so much for that really generous introduction. I crawled out of the basement today to come into the empty building, so I am here on the 12th floor of 1200 New York Avenue, and it is this beautiful monument to science that my predecessors and our predecessors have built is a lonely place right now during this pandemic, and I'm really looking forward to when it will once again have a whole bunch of life coursing through it. When I was a kid, growing up in North Carolina, I often found refuge in science and studying, I found refuge from the things I didn't like about the world around me. Science felt like a place of safety, a place of merit, a place that was a bubble unto itself. But what I learned over time is that there are no bubbles. We scientists are of our communities. And when our communities are facing challenges and are in pain, we are. We can't escape the problems of our society because we carry those successes and those challenges and those failures. We carry those with us wherever we go. We carry them with us into our homes. We carry them with us into our places of worship, and we carry them with us into our laboratories. Whether it's a pandemic, unchecked racism, sexism, homophobia, or fear of the other, any of that can enter into any organization, any community, any nation. And it can destroy the foundations upon which we must build our future. And this past year has exposed for me how a lack of trust, respect, and leadership can tear at our social fabric. And in these times, I think we as scientists must really pull together and provide leadership in our own communities and be willing to serve as leaders in our communities. Leadership's not about having all the answers. It's about bringing people together, starting the conversation, and then dedicating yourself to some unwavering principles that can guide your decisions. Other speakers have already talked about the tragedies of 2020, the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and too many others. The deaths of over 210,000 Americans and over 1 million people worldwide from COVID-19, the economic destruction caused by the pandemic, and the increased disruptions that are due to climate change, including wildfires and flooding and storms. These are just incredibly, incredibly challenging times. You know, the first thing that I thought of when seeing these tragedies unfold is that we should recommit to our principles in DEI, recommit to our principles to serve society. But what I learned from conversations around the country with our membership and with scientists and with students is that this wasn't enough. That recommitment, that rededication wasn't enough. I was told over and over again by scientists on the front lines and by students on the front lines that talk is cheap. These tragedies sparked anger, they sparked fear, they sparked soul searching. And it was a time for difficult conversations and really awkward discussions within this organization and across society. But what it led to was an understanding for myself and I think for the AAAS leadership team that science, engineering, and medicine just aren't immune to discrimination or the silencing of our minority colleagues and voices. The reasons for this are deeply ingrained in the systems that govern the conduct of these fields. And using the words of our editor-in-chief, Holden Thorpe, when we hold up a mirror to this scientific enterprise, it is clear that we have to be reminded that Black and other underrepresented minority lives and scientific contributions matter. And like almost every generation has arrived at a similar moment of opportunity born from tragedy. And almost all of them have uneven records of progress. Progress requires systemic change that as of yet, we have been unable to make progress on. To be clear, AAAS is a part of that system. We enable success in the sciences. We enable scientists to have impact in their communities. We're a part of that. And we just need to ensure that this moment doesn't slip away and that we as scientists and we as the AAAS and other organizations in the scientific community can and must be a powerful force for change. And so some of the first things that I saw were data like these. This is from the 3M State of Science Index. It's a survey, a global survey, saying what are the barriers to STEM education that are holding students back. I draw your attention down to the third bar there that inequalities, my gender, race, and/or ethnicity. 27% of respondents said this, but in the U.S., it was 50%. 50% of students said that one of the barriers to STEM education holding them back were inequalities based on their gender, their race, or their ethnicity. And from that same survey, too many students have already been discouraged from STEM. In Gen Z, 28% of students have said they've been actively discouraged from STEM fields, and 24% of millennials. And you can see that that number is growing over time. It was only 9% for boomers. This is data that I've taken from Kenny Gibbs at the NIH from a talk that he gave here last year, showing in the biomedical sciences, where are we in terms of representation at different ranks of the academic ladder. And what you see is that as you move deeper into seniority and the upper rungs of academia, that representation of a diverse set of scientists decreases. It decreases. And this is happening despite the fact that the pipeline may be even growing for some of these groups at the beginning end. And so it is a problem not just of waiting for this cohort of diversity to wash its way through the system. That is not making progress in the biomedical sciences anyway. And so after these discussions and after looking at these data and after talking with many, many scientists around the country, we at AAAS put together a set of draft plans that commit us to concrete actions to address systemic racism. Because as I heard, and that rings in my ears over and over, talk is cheap. Statements are easy. It's easy to say strong words. And so what are we going to do about it? And so I'd encourage you to go to our website to read these draft plans. We've kept them very short. But what they're fundamentally based upon is that AAAS functions as we enable career advancement in science and engineering. If you publish in the science family of journals or you comment in a science news story, that gives you a platform for scientists to amplify your impact. And frankly, it puts you on your way to a career in the sciences. If you are recognized as a AAAS selected fellow, you've got additional credibility and stature amongst the community. If you receive a AAAS S&T policy fellowship, you've opened a pathway to a career in science policy. And it goes on and on. We have many of these functions in which we enable careers. And what we decided in summary is that we're going to make DEI normative in what we do by undergoing what we call the AAAS Sea Change assessment. Sea Change is a program that is the brainchild of Shirley Malcolm, who has been well ahead of her time in really working to make DEI a part and baked in to the policies of large institutions. And so what we'll do is we'll collect and make public aggregate demographic data on our authors, our reviewers, our award winners, and our fellows. We'll collect and make public demographic data on our selection functions of the AAAS. So not just the output, but the selection functions that make those outcomes possible. And then for transparency, and so that the scientific community can hold us accountable, we'll publish that data annually. And the AAAS board and management are going to review this data in the normal course of reviewing our work. So first, just talking about Sea Change. Sea Change is a comprehensive initiative, and it was really aimed by Dr. Malcolm at academia, at implementing proven self-assessment processes that affect sustainable change in DEI. And it's based on programs that were first developed in the UK, and it really answers the question, how do we untie ourselves from the practices of the past that made inequities possible, really inevitable, and then allowed them to persist? You can see the principles that go along with this on our website. I encourage you to go there. I think it's really informative. And so we're going to collect and make public aggregate demographic data on all these functions that you're seeing here. And you start to realize how many areas in which AAAS enables careers. I continue here. It's not just those selection functions. It's also our governance, our board of directors, our council, our section leadership. These are functions that are in every scientific society and every group of scientists. Our senior management, our journal editors, etc. And the reason we're doing this is because transparency leads to accountability. Demographic data in each of these are going to be published annually. We're going to commit to provide clear data that doesn't obfuscate trends by blending groups or highlighting only one axis of diversity. This is really important. It's very easy to fall into a trap as a leader of wanting to tell a good news story. And you can do that by highlighting the places where you are making progress. And maybe only one axis of diversity. So really trying hard not to obfuscate trends. I want to confess to you that in many instances, this data is compiled through voluntary self-reporting. The initial data sets have huge limitations. With appropriate constraints, we're going to appeal to folks to self-report demographic data, but it's messy. It's messy. We're going to, and as I said, we're going to integrate this review into our standard practices. So I'm going to give you a sense of what this looks like because we're going to release this data at the end of the month. So these are a pictorial way of representing some of the areas in which we're going to make demographic data accessible. There are limitations and concerns for our statistician friends out there. This isn't in a publication because it has data coverage issues. It has data consistency issues. It has gender data issues. It has we've been very careful on confidentiality and ethical concerns, but that carefulness makes it to where it's hard to pull data in. But what we really feel like is that exposing the data issues now will lead to improved data over time. This is not a one-time exercise. This is building a baseline. It's going to be an imperfect process. Transparency is the key. Transparency in our processes and our methodology of collecting this data and analyzing it, so that you on the outside can look at it and make your analyses as well. I have to say, when I told the data team that we needed to do this, they did a review of other organizations and said, who else does this? Can we learn? And what we really found is that if it were easy, everyone would do it. It is messy. And I recognize that we will take criticism for some of the data. But the benefits outweigh the risks. That imperfect data and that imperfect process, we will improve it over time. But the improved DEI, the advancing science in a better way, and serving society better outweighs those risks. So I wanted to give you a preview of what some of that data looks like. And here is that data for our honorary fellows. So these are our fellows who are nominated. They have distinguished careers, and they have won recognition from their peers. So these are these rainbow charts are how we're presenting the data. I want to show you some of the concerns. So this is an N of 8,700. 30%, we have no data. We have no data. So it's a huge limitation of the data. These percentages that you see here on the left are based on including that no data as a group. So when you look at that, we show 61.5% are white non-Hispanic. We show 0.8% are Black or African American, but that is with a no data set of 30%. So we'll have to work on what conclusions to draw from that. But even starting, 61% versus 0.8% is well beyond what our society looks like, what America looks like. On the gender side of things, if you go over here, 73% are male, and about 20% are female of our honorary fellows. This is all active members, so all that are out there. You might ask the question, what's it look like for a more recent year, just a class of inductees? And so that's what this next slide shows. 435 inductees in the class of 2019. Again, a large no data set, 49% with no data. But if you look, and what I think the way to look at this is to look at ratios of those percentages. So 42.5% white, 1.1% Black or African American, that ratio is, it's 40. It's a large number. Again, not reflecting society, not reflecting the academic community. Going to gender, almost 60% male and about 32% female. Again, I would look at ratios as well. So some work to do here. This is not representative of America. I want to contrast that with our S&T policy fellows. So this is, for those of you who don't know, this is a program that we run in collaboration with many societies around the country, placing scientists in government, either in Congress or in the executive branch, and actually now even in the judicial branch. We have 281 of these policy fellows this year. And here we have more complete data. They do self-report. And what you're going to see here is a rainbow chart that really looks a lot more like America. And part of that is that this is an application-based program versus a nomination-based program, which was the previous one. On the gender side of things, women outnumber men for this program. I thought it'd be instructive to look at what the selection committee looks like. So this is the selection committee for the S&T Policy Fellows. And here again, it looks like America. And so what you see here, and again, this is a very early analysis. I just want to give you a taste of what some of the data looks like. But you see contrasts. You see contrasts in processes. And that's a lot of what you'll find here is that sometimes these things are baked in, and it's not about the thoughts or the biases of any individual. It's about the policies that we have accepted for a long time. So I think we have a real opportunity looking at that data and working forward to hopefully take concrete actions. What I've noticed is that even looking makes a difference. The second part of our efforts in addressing systemic racism centered around really mobilizing all Americans for the scientific enterprise, and then mobilizing the scientific enterprise for all Americans. So what are we doing in terms of advocacy and programs to increase DEI in science and engineering? And so here we, again, looking for concrete actions. And what you find is that it becomes very challenging to find concrete policy proposals that are out there that we know are proven to move the needle. But as one of the nation's most prominent voices in the enterprise, we think that when AAAS speaks, leaders and policymakers listen. And so one of the first things we talk to with students about is making careers in science and engineering accessible without the privilege of a family safety net. And this does require systemic change. If you're a graduate student studying the sciences and you have a stipend of $30,000 a year, it is very hard in the face of a pandemic where maybe some of your roommates have gone back to work from home because they have that family safety net. It's hard to continue if you don't have that. How do you afford your apartment in Boston or Palo Alto? And so some of the things that we've talked with students and others about is increased salaries for graduate students and postdoctoral researchers, parental leave and other stable employee-like benefits. They're not employees, but let's face it, things have changed between the practices of 50 years ago and today in terms of the lives of students. These are longer times that they're spending as students and postdocs. This has to look more employee-like in order to be enticing, in order to keep students, good students, in the sciences. Things like automatic grant extensions for family leave and programs for loan forgiveness to persons who enter employment in service to society. Also recommitting government and industry funded science programs for minority students. And I've seen a lot of this in the recent past. Many companies are stepping up to provide investments. But these programs had been flat or falling for a decade. Also cluster acceptance into academic programs and cluster hiring into the workplace. Critical mass is really important to retention. And then the other thing that students talked to us about was training for mentors. Mentors and sponsors don't have to look like mentees, and certainly not at first, but they should understand the challenges that are faced by underrepresented minorities. And the other thing we're committed to is fully developing Sea Change. So we're going to invest in Sea Change so that we can have more of an effect. There are already charter members that have joined Sea Change, and many more still yet to come. And then here, and I know you can't read this, but this is the large number of programs at AAAS that are already working in the support of inclusion in the sciences. I'd encourage you to go to our website and see this in our draft plan. You know, what I wanted to say about this is that we've been here before. In 1969, there were protests at the AAAS meeting, and those protests led to the board putting together a committee of young scientists. That committee of young scientists really put forth some recommendations that created the modern AAAS in terms of the programs that we enable. And that committee of young scientists went on to great careers in the sciences, university presidents and others. But their work stalled, and after a couple of years they disbanded. And the lesson I learned from that is that you have to keep talking about this. You have to keep the momentum going if you want to make positive change, because the pushback is real. I have seen it. I have seen it with the messages that I send out. I've seen it with the messages that Holden Thorpe, when he writes something on the editorial page of Science. Some of it is constructive feedback. Some of it is unfair criticism, and some of it is vile. And I think that is something that we should note. We should say out loud. It's important to know that that pushback is real. It's also important to note that AAAS is committed. The board, the council, as we go through this governance modernization project, they have been very clear that this should be central to what we do as an organization. So we are committed, and that pushback may be there, but we're going to keep working. You're going to see more from us, because that sustained activity is part of making progress. So I talked about one opportunity born of tragedy, and that's to make progress on systemic racism. I'm going to talk about a second. You know, the U.S. is faced with these profound challenges. You know, achieving prosperity and health and security for all Americans really requires addressing challenges in several areas. And I'll just put them up here. But these are heightened because of COVID-19. And, you know, we've been here before as well. Post-World War II, Sputnik, 9/11, these all led to changes in the way the American people think about science. And I'm going to go back to that 3M State of Science Index. They did a survey before the pandemic in early 2020, and then they did a survey in the middle of the pandemic in the spring. And they asked the same question about, are you willing to stand up for science when debating its merits with others? And in the pre-pandemic survey, 20% of people said they would. 20% of everybody. I thought that was pretty good, actually. But during the pandemic, 54% say that COVID-19 has made them more likely to advocate for science. 54%. That's a big number who are willing to be active advocates for science. And science is essential to delivering solutions and enabling our aspirations. I think we all believe that because we're in the sciences for that reason. But our investments have stagnated, and we heard about this yesterday. And some of the structures have frozen in place. And way too many Americans of talent and promise are on the sidelines. And here I'm talking not just about diversity along race and ethnic and gender lines. I'm talking about geography, as was discussed yesterday as well, and socioeconomic status. So we have to really summon our common resolve. We have to mobilize to meet this moment with what's really a generational commitment. I think the opportunities are clear to all of us in the sciences, right? I mean, there's never been a time when I've been more excited about what's just around the corner in the sciences. You know, we have the opportunity to not just treat, but cure disease. We have the opportunity to create new technology that increases prosperity. And I know that we are working for security as well. Ensuring that national success, though, is going to require addressing race, gender, and geographic inequalities in the scientific enterprise. We are facing in the competitive landscape, large countries, demographic behemoths, as some friends of mine have called them. It's always been indefensible and wrong to not be pulling from our entire population, but now it's just plain careless and stupid. We have to pull from our population the minds that are going to take us to the future. You know, what happens if we don't commit? And look, that's where there's two possible futures: one where America continues to lead, and one where America is diminished. And I am confident that we will choose an America that continues to lead. And you know, it's not just me that says that. It's not just these surveys that say that, but we know that more challenges are on the way. I showed you this slide already about that increase in advocacy and allies, but it's always good when you see that data in multiple surveys. Research America had a survey. You know, 4 out of 5 Americans are saying that it's time for an urgent refocus on science. Again, this is data collected in the pandemic. Because of COVID-19, people are more likely to acknowledge the critical role that science plays in society. And these are huge numbers here in this, again, this science, this 3M survey, that 78% say that science plays a critical role in solving public health crises. 77% say science needs more funding. These are big numbers. And then just a large majority believe that it's time to commit to a major new initiative in science. And when you see that public sentiment, you also see it in the political sentiment. And so we've touched on some of these during yesterday. There are several proposals out there on both sides of the aisle for R&D investment. The Endless Frontiers Act, I think you all know about large authorization for funding for NSF. I will caution you, authorization is not appropriations. House Republicans have put out a plan saying that we need to double U.S. basic research over the next 10 years, $170 billion over 10 years of an increase. That's astounding. When I spent almost a decade working on the Appropriations Committee. The challenging part for science were House Republicans, and here we have House Republicans calling for doubling of the U.S. basic research over 10 years. The Biden campaign has put forth a number of $300 billion over, I think it's over 4 years actually, I apologize, in R&D. So there are multiple pieces of the political system that see the need, the value, and the opportunities that are sitting in front of us if we invest in science. And as a community, we need to be bold in this moment. As a community, we need to make sure that we are not making the mistakes of the past in terms of how we might spend that money. Make sure that we are drawing upon our entire population. But let's be clear, this is an opportunity born of this tragedy, this series of tragedies. And if we don't grab it, we'll be missing a generational opportunity to really make progress on strengthening science within the United States. So what I would say to you is that if we don't, there's these moments that are born of opportunity. And again, these happen in many generations. Addressing systemic racism in the sciences, trying to get more investment in our infrastructure and our research. But talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. These students have shown me this and have really made it possible for me to see it. We have to be concrete with our proposals and our actions. I heard a story from a friend of mine who is married to a better friend of mine, I guess, saying, she's an early career scientist at the NIH, and she heard about our discussions yesterday, particularly about all the conversations about acknowledging what's happening to our pipeline, acknowledging that we could be losing a generation of scientists right now because of COVID, because of immigration policy, et cetera. And her response was, I was just in a meeting where I was talking about job opportunities in this current marketplace for people involved in the BRAIN initiative. And not once did gender equity come up. Not once did folks talk about the difference in effect of this pandemic on women versus men. And when talked about at all, it was talked about in terms of perseverance. You need to keep submitting papers, keep submitting grants. That's the way to do this. As we talked about yesterday, there is, and I think Shirley Tillman did a wonderful job of talking about this in terms of the sustainability of the scientific workforce is a real goal that we need to be looking at as well, in addition to just looking at the proposal itself. So when I talk about this, what I always say is, look, talk is cheap. We need to be concrete. Don't let the perfect get in the way of the good when it comes to funding. I've heard comments about past increases to funding and how it may have can't come too fast or too quickly. There are moments of opportunity in the political cycle, and you build funding into the base. We work with baseline budgeting here in the United States. Don't take that for granted. Adding that $12 billion to NIH's budget in between 1998 and 2003, that means that every year since then, we've had $12 billion more dollars to spend on scientific research, well over $120 billion by now, well over $220 billion by now. So don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. Let's fix the mistakes of the past, but let's not let the perfect get in the way of the good. This is a defining moment. What we do right now is going to be judged by history. In the same way that I've looked back at 1969, someone's going to be looking back at us. And it is my hope that we double the national commitment to science and broaden its scope such that science is done by all, and that we make the meritocracy, because I do love the meritocracy. I told you, I took refuge in it, but we make it accessible to all, so that talent and drive may carry each of us as far as they can take us, but it needs to be accessible to all. And that on the shoulders of each of these individual successes, we meet our moment and create both awe-inspiring discoveries. I want to see the mountains of Pluto, and better lives for all of us. I want to see cures for COVID and for Alzheimer's and everything else. So that is my hope. That is what I hope is our legacy. I think we as a generation are going to meet this moment, but it's going to require everyone. And I'm so glad this meeting is reaching more people by being virtual, because we speak to ourselves here in Washington a lot. I hope for those of you outside of Washington, hold us accountable. Make sure that we're saying concrete things, not abstract policy things. And with that, I'll end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Sudip, thank you. That was an extraordinary presentation, and we have, not surprisingly, the number of questions is starting to increase, but I just want to read one of the comments that has gotten many thumbs up, and it echoes my thoughts, and it starts out by saying, "Thank you so much for your leadership. Glad to see AAAS putting in the work to gather this data and make it available." And the question is, are there efforts from other scientific professional organizations to do this work as well? And if not, are there ways for AAAS to encourage them to do so?
We did a landscape of this. Thank you for that question, and thank you for the comments. We did a landscape of this back in February, and we didn't see it, but of course, if someone had done a landscape of us, they wouldn't have seen it for us either. So my hope is that it's underway elsewhere in the ecosystem. If not, we have a lot of lessons learned that we'd be happy to share. This is an area where I think collaboration is key, because we haven't got it right. I know we don't have it right yet, and we need all the brain power we can put to it.
And maybe as a follow-up to that, what do you see as the measures of success? How will you know when you are on the right track?
Yeah, you know, it's challenging, right? Because there's no, these policy decisions, you know, everything, when I worked in Congress, people always said there's a slippery slope, and we said every policy decision is a slippery slope. There are ramifications to everything that you do. And so the first thing is to actually be transparent. And so we can see We can see what this data says, and that leads to a broader conversation in this community where I hope that many, many voices will come out to help us define what is success. I think in the short term, as we get this, as we become more transparent to the leadership and to the board, if we see opportunities that stand out to us in terms of processes that are obviously holding us back, I want to make sure that we're addressing those quickly. As I said before, many of these things are not about individuals. It's not about the biases of any individual. It's things that are baked in. And those baked in policies, sometimes it's been forgotten why they are as they are, especially in organizations as old as AAAS. We're 170 years old. And so my hope is that we will see some of those and be able to act. But then otherwise, I really do hope that it starts a conversation. I think that the conversation is as important as us laying down a marker.
Thank you. There are a number of questions I'm going to try and combine because I think they touch upon the same topic, and they really get at the challenge of balancing the different aspects of diversity. Almost as if in some respects that if you have a target, there is sort of a zero-sum game aspect to this. By increasing the numbers of individuals in a certain demographic, it means that others are could be viewed as being excluded. Can you share your thoughts on how to deal with this very difficult balancing act while at the same time moving everything forward as it's clear that we need to do?
Yeah, this is challenging and it's awkward. It leads to hard conversations. What I'll say is that nothing that we should do should diminish the story of anyone else. There are wonderful stories in science amongst everyone. So nothing should diminish those stories. Is it a zero-sum game? It's not if there's new resources, new investments. And so my hope is, and again, I don't have the answers to all of this. I think that this community is going to have to come together to figure it out. But if we have new investment, if we have new opportunity, we need scientists from across this population to widen the aperture of what we think is an important piece of science and to widen the aperture of the questions that we ask. And I think that we can do that, particularly in a time of new financial resources. It's easier then. I'm not saying it's ever going to be perfect. I'm not saying it's ever going to be non-controversial. But if we as a community can agree on what is appropriate, or at least come to some consensus on that, then we'll move forward. I wish I had an answer that said that this is the perfect way of slicing this. I don't, but that's part of what the looking doesn't cause that problem. If we don't look, we just sweep it under the rug. I think we should at least know we have it.
Thank you. You noted in your presentation that there has sort of been a growing sense among younger generations of potential scientists that they're not being encouraged to pursue careers in STEM. And one of the questions gets at that specifically, that this is a big part of the problem. And so the question is, how do we best encourage young people to pursue science because I think we all know that if you look at young people before they've started to become influenced by some of this rhetoric, it's almost a universal fascination with science. You talked about it yourself as a child. It was true for me, but somehow we've managed to figure out how to drum that enthusiasm out of students. Any thoughts on how this might be tackled? Because clearly this is going to be part of the solution, I think.
Yeah, in talking to students, what I hear often is choosing to go into the sciences requires sacrifices, right? If you go beyond a bachelor's degree in the sciences, you are perhaps committing to a decade of training at low salary and without the benefits that an employee would have. And if you're a first generation college graduate, regardless of whether or not you are from the Mississippi Delta or rural Appalachia, that's a hard sacrifice. That's a sacrifice not just for you, but for the family that made sacrifices to get you there. So I think that one of the things we can do is to actually make it more appealing in that time period of learning, that time period of being a student, because I think that if we can do that, we make it to where it's not so hard. I think Michelle McMurray Heath last night was saying that one of the problems that we have is that there's a competition for these excellent minds, and business is calling to them. Other specialties are calling to them, and if we can't win that battle, when I think that we're all natural scientists, that really falls to us for bad policy making in terms of what we're putting people through to make it to becoming a scientist.
Another question that really, I think, gets at some of the challenges of pursuing a career in science. Let me just read this to you. Regardless of the diversity of the workforce, is the real problem in the sciences and in other marketplaces the intensive and extensive workload, meaning the time crush? Is that the biggest drawback to working in the sciences? And I guess the answer, if you think that's true or a big contributor, how do we get around that?
Yeah, look, it's always going to be hard intellectually. It might be always hard in terms of in terms of time, but it shouldn't be impossible. And I think that's what's happened, right? I think Shirley Tillman last night talked about the fact that when she went into administration, she remembers the morale being high among scientists and a real camaraderie and a real sense of doing science. And then when she came back, she was surprised at what had happened to the morale in terms of the stress and the concern about funding and the worries of young scientists in getting their first grants. You know, she talked about the pay lines when she got her first grant were in the 30s, and when she came out of administration, they were in the teens. That can be fixed. That can be fixed with policy and with a decision by society to invest in the sciences. It's never going to be, I think all of us as scientists, we love this, right? We love it and we are committed and we want to do it. We want to give it its due in terms of time. If I'm 27 years old and I'm ready to start a family, I want to be able to do that too. And we need to be able to make sure that's possible in the sciences, just like it is in every other field.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. We have a multi-part question here, and I'm going to try and summarize because I think this is a really important concept here. Is there some hypocrisy in researchers promoting their basic research for generating innovation and societal good, but not addressing the potential negative impacts of their work through the same mechanisms? And another part of this, how much responsibility do basic researchers have, not only in making their workplaces more equitable, but also in speaking up when appropriate about the use of created technology and knowledge for potentially exclusive endeavors?
I think we have a responsibility, right? As basic researchers, it is so important that you're the first to think about what are the implications of your work. It's not to say you have the final say, but as scientists, we are members of society, right? When I said that we are of our communities, the only way we build trust with these communities is by showing up, and speaking. And so, you don't get trust by being a PhD or by being an MD. You get trust by having a relationship and shared values and showing up for a community. And I think whenever you feel that there are implications to your basic research, you should talk about those. You should talk about those in a way that whoever is affected can understand, because if not you, then who? Who's going to do it?
Maybe this is a bit of a follow-on question. Do you think advertising science as a mostly intellectual, sacrificial pursuit may actually perpetuate the notion of privilege? What if we focus more on advertising science as a personally rewarding pursuit, can that make it more appealing to those less privileged?
It's a great question. I think it can. I think it can. I don't pretend to know the views of everybody, but it feels to me like that there are different value propositions for why you'd want to enter a career in science. I think I was lucky enough that I hadn't thought about what's a lifetime look like of working in the sciences. I think that today students think about what is that lifetime going to look like, and they see the lives of their professors, and they either see a personally rewarding job and life, or they see drudgery. And I think we need to be able to communicate what that life is like, and hopefully make that life better for not just underrepresented students, for all students. We need more scientists, period. But we very much need more underrepresented scientists.
We don't have too many more minutes left, and we still have a lot of questions to get to, and they're fabulous questions. I thank everybody who has submitted them, and I apologize in advance if we're not going to get to all of them. But let's switch gears just a little bit and go back to some of the data that you shared about AAAS membership and the distribution of demographics in terms of the fellows versus the AAAS fellows versus the S&T fellows. This question asks first, what is the distribution of the AAAS membership in the USA? I'm not exactly sure what they're asking. Question as to whether or not awards are include the foreign members or just US members. And I think the question is here is what is your feeling with regard to having membership reflect the population at large, or the population in the scientific community? Maybe you could just expand a bit more on those striking differences in the demographics between the honorific fellowships that come in one way and the S&T policy fellows that are self-nominated.
Yeah. I'd start with what is our, they asked, what does our membership look like? You'll see some of that data at the end of this month in graphs that look very much like the ones I showed you. We have a lot of missing data there. A lot of people who haven't self-reported. So I don't want to, I don't remember off the top of my head, but there's a lot of missing data there. But what I will say is it's not even as good as the demographics of the scientific workforce in the US, right? I do know that much in terms of diversity. So we should at least aspire to that in our membership. And I'd encourage you, if I hear a lot of voices about, what is valuable about this. And I told you, I get feedback and pushback that can be quite surprising sometimes. The only way that the board and the council and others can support this kind of work is by having voices that are speaking up in favor of it. So I think it's important to have these new voices at the table in terms of membership in AAAS. Speaking to the fellows and the S&T policy fellows, these are really different demographics, right? So what's the cause? And we haven't done an in-depth study, but one is a nominations process and done by your peers, and really speaks to networks. Who do you know that you think has done a very good job in the field? Even if you know them by reputation, they're part of your network. Whereas the S&T policy fellowship is an application base where it's self-selecting that students want to pursue a career in policy. And what we've seen is that, it doesn't just happen by itself. There's deliberate, we are trying to recruit into these positions a diverse applicant pool, but we get there because they see opportunity, they see a career that they really would value. And I hope is that we can over time start to see that expand across our different functions and across membership within AAAS.
Thank you. Here are a couple of really interesting ideas that have come in. Guess for you to think about, but maybe comment on right now. Have you thought about the idea of reverse mentoring? The idea that senior leaders are mentored by their junior trainees to help the senior people better understand the trainees' experience and perspective. And this may work best within an institution, but it is an interesting idea to help expand awareness and understanding in as many directions as possible.
I love this idea. You know, I think that there's so much to be gained both ways in the mentor-mentee relationship. When it comes to simple things like, what am I supposed to be doing on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, to what's it like to actually be a student today versus what I remember it to be like 25 years ago. And I think that those are incredibly valuable conversations for a mentor and a mentee to have. I'd love to spur those at AAAS, but I think you're right that they should certainly be happening at the university level.
And another interesting idea, retirees are sitting on the sidelines. We could contribute in a part-time way to assist science. Even if we don't have new technical techniques or data collection and analysis methods, we could be taught. Do you see retirees who wouldn't necessarily be working full-time as a part of the solution and a part of the big picture?
You know, we've seen it just here locally in the Washington, D.C. area. So AAAS has a small program, mostly retired scientists who go into schools here in the Washington, D.C. and in the suburbs. And they are a committed group of scientists. And I can tell you, one of them actually came to one of my children's schools, and my kids loved it. Right? It's a wonderful program. And so, yeah, it's not about the latest chromatography or the latest whiz bang technology, but rather about the love for science and the scientific method and the scientific process. And I think that there are definitely ways for retirees to participate. And if you're in the DC area, I'd encourage reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect you to that program.
And maybe the last question, because we are almost out of time. And this has to do with bringing more qualified people into the science policy arena, and perhaps allowing them to do this if they're bench scientists without leaving the bench. And the idea, the notion that's put forward is, could AAAS support policy initiatives and groups at universities and help students realize at the earliest possible stage in their career that opportunities in policy are important and they aren't necessarily mutually exclusive with other scientific endeavors?
I love this, Claire. This is just, I see it so much. There is an enormous amount of energy and creativity in the graduate student and postdoctoral world right now. They are self-organizing. We are collaborating, hoping to provide opportunities, but they've, across the country, at campuses around the country, students have been gathering, and they've been working with our S&T policy fellows. They've been working with our local and state engagement networks that AAAS has, really forming those relationships that I'm talking about in terms of, you know what, you don't need to wait till you're a full professor to become involved in policy. When you are able to build a relationship in your community, you're able to talk about science in a way that makes sense to people, and you're able to do your bench lab work as a graduate student or a postdoc, that is incredibly valuable. I actually think it's more valuable than me flying into to St. Louis, right? If I fly into St. Louis, I'm just a guy from Washington, D.C. who they've never heard of. If it's a 27-year-old scientist on the ground who's been to a student council meeting or has been to a county commissioner meeting, that is much more effective in terms of putting science at the table than a fly-in by me or by someone from the AAAS board. Even it's so incredibly valuable. So I really encourage this generation that is coming up. They're showing just an incredible amount of energy and creativity and engaging, and AAAS is going to try and find ways to support and would be happy to reach out to folks.
Well, thank you. We are unfortunately out of time, and you have really given us some food for thought today, and We are lucky as an organization to have you at the helm.